Greetings 268ers, this is Professor Kaufman, and what ensues is a video to help you get set up to code for our course. This course has a number of goals, including coming to grips with compute systems, the hardware behind them, the way software stacks on top of it. But there are a whole bunch of practical skills that will also come out of your interaction with hardware. In particular, you're going to learn a little bit about Unix systems and developing on remote systems. We're blessed to have access to the Zaratan high-performance compute cluster, and this is a bit of a change over previous semesters where an older, more podunky system called Grace was in use. You'll be sort of the guinea pigs in accessing it, but I'm very excited about this because it's a high-performance compute center, so the performance of it is going to be very strong, and that'll mean your programs will run faster. You can probably have a faster turnaround in terms of testing and so forth. But it also has a number of niceties in terms of logging in. All that's to come, and we'll walk through this setup guide along with the various softwares that you'll use to connect to that and get some code done there. And that should get you oriented. This video will be complemented by a video which comes later, which walks you through solving the first lab work. That will actually involve a little bit of coding and so forth, but be a good chance for you to test whether the setup that we do in this setup has come to fruition. All right, so just in terms of orientation, there will be this University of Maryland Zaratan cluster, which is a remote computer, others sometimes referred to as a server, sometimes as cluster, sort of depends on what it is. But this is one that you can actually connect to by using a shell. We'll make use of the very common secure shell, or SSH, which is installed by default on most systems, modern Windows, modern Mac OS included in that. If you're using Linux, you may need to install this, but it oftentimes comes by default as it's so ubiquitous. This comes with a number of command line programs: SSH to connect to computers, SCP to copy things, and SFTP to do file transfers of various kinds. But you'll get just a little bit acquainted with those, and I've gotten feedback from past students that this is extremely useful in some lines of work where the companies that they are at only have remote access to certain kinds of machines, and so use of SSH and other remote development tools is necessary for that. The recommended setup for all platforms, that includes Windows and Mac, is to make use of an editor called VSCodium, along with the SFTP Secure File Transfer Protocol add-on that is to that. Now, this might be a little bit unfamiliar to you. There is a much better known version of this called VS Code. The difference between these two is essentially whether Microsoft is involved or not. VS Code is a very popular code browser. It's branded according to Microsoft, but has the same guts as the open source free version of VSCodium. VS Code itself is free, but we're encouraging students to use VSCodium instead for the following reasons. Microsoft has invested very deeply in the use of AI tools, and so the products that they put out, including VS Code, really ram that stuff down your throat. AI is a powerful tool. LLMs are slated to make software development much easier, but for the stage that you're at, which is the learning stage, they will interfere greatly. And so students that wish to actually learn more as they proceed through this class are strongly urged to make use of the endorsed VSCodium browser. Code editor, IDE, as it were. This one has all of those AI features and LLMs excised and disabled by default if they're there at all. And so this is a boon to you that you'll get to write your own stuff, compare it. You can then choose to prompt AIs that are external to the code editor if you want. Whereas if you use VS Code, then likely by default, it's going to try and do all kinds of things for you that are just probably going to get in the way for you. If you want further incentive, you'll be able to write code and analyze code during your exams. However, all use of AIs and LLMs and their ilk is forbidden. And more than one student has been caught using VS Code and its AI features advertently in some cases, but inadvertently because they clicked on the wrong thing, and all of them have been sanctioned with involvement of the Office of Student Conduct. So a safe way to proceed is just install VSCodium, and you won't have to worry about that kind of thing happening in the very sensitive situation of exams. Let's download and install VSCodium. I'll punch the link here and hopefully it'll work to take me over to the place that's released. Should open up another browser tab. This is an open source project, so it looks a little bit different in terms of install and stuff, but all you really need to do is to find an appropriate download for you. I'm going to select, because I'm on a Windows machine, this user installer here. I won't even need to have the administrator privileges to install this, because it'll install locally in that. If you want to install it system-wide, because you're not the only user of your laptop or something like that, you might select the system installer. Mac OS folks probably can just use the DMG over here and install that as per the way that a lot of folks, or a lot of Mac OS stuff, as you drag and drop into does something there. So I'm going to punch this, and I think it'll probably look a little funny as it downloads over here, because I've already downloaded once to sort of go through this thing. So then once that's there, I'm going to punch this thing to start the setup. It should take only a moment or so. I'll accept the agreement that this is free software and comes without warranty, more or less, but that's not a big deal. Take the default options, and then yeah, that's all. That should be good enough. I like desktop icons, so I'm going to plop one down there and then install. I don't know what's happening over here in terms of this thing, but I may as well close this tab now because I don't think I'll need it anymore. Sit back over to the installer, sit on my hands for just a minute while this thing's up. Actually, while that's installing, I can probably go on to some of the next steps. After we get VSCodium installed, I will need to set up the, do just a little bit of setup in it by installing an extension to it, a little add-on that gives it some additional features. And then we'll also need to create some directories in some place of note on the computer. Looks like the install is just about done, so I'll go ahead and keep the launch VSCodium there before moving on to the next step. So what you'll see over here then is some sort of a code explorer that has potentially a file or folder opened. In this case, it doesn't in my case. And let's see, what we'll need to do as well then is to install, let's see, we'll search around for SFTP up here in this thing, and I believe it's the very first option. It usually comes up this Natizi Skunk, great user handle out there. But there are a couple of versions of this SFTP things floating around. Look for this one as it is the one that's currently maintained. There's an older version that's now there. Now you might need to push an install or something like that, but it looks like this thing installed just fine for me. Later on in the class, I'm going to install one other extension, which enables syntax highlighting and dealing with assembly code a little bit either. But I think we're more or less done here. I'm going to pause the recording for just a moment because I need to check something else to make sure I didn't screw it up over here. Okay, everything seems to be in order, so I'll minimize my recorder here. Getting back to VS Code, this is about all we need to do here for the moment, but I'm going to leave it open as we'll return to it in just a moment. And then over here, I'll just minimize that, and I'm going to open up the File Explorer. This is specific to Windows, but it's called Finder on Mac. Do whatever you need to do to find like some way to access folders where things are stored on your computer. Now, it's a good idea for me just to mention and chastise some folks at the moment that modern operating systems like Windows and Mac OS have started to obscure the actual arrangement of files on the file system that's associated with those computers. So generally there's a big tree of folders that exists on most systems, but the default view that you get on something like this is a bit obscuring of that. Even on the Windows and Mac OS, you'll have some sort of a home directory where a lot of this stuff is under. But my main goal at this point is just to establish a folder where you're going to keep most of the work that you'll do for CMSC216. Since it seems reasonable, I'll plop it down in the Documents folder here. Other good options might be your desktop or something like that. But do whatever you need to do here to create a folder. In my case, I'm going to right-click, and Mac OS users, like however you can create a new folder. I'll plop that down. I'm going to select a folder here, and I'll call it lowercase CMSC216, as that's the name that'll be used in the setup guide throughout this. Okay, so that's all we need to do in the file browser. We'll go jump back over to VSCodium. And then over here, I'm going to go to the Explorer part here, and then open up that folder that I just created. That's supposed to be open folder here. And then this should open into your home directory. I can see there are a few things that are hidden from view from the standard file browser. But then as well over here, let's see, it's in documents, and I'll punch this S2026. Don't double click because it's actually, we want to select that folder to open. This will serve then as the basis for projects, as the VSCodium ID sort of. Now you'll see some options over here that sort of reflect other things that you might do in a file browser. So for instance, I can create a new folder in here, and we'll do so now, and call this one 216 sync, SYNC. This is the directory that we'll use to synchronize between our local machine, the laptop, and the files that are stored up on the server. And at most times then the same files will be stored on both, but as you might make changes locally, then those will go up to the server, or if new files are created on the server Zaratan, then you can trigger those files to come back down. That's what that SFTP client will be useful for. I'm going to turn back over to the setup guide so that you can track here. We've accomplished the establishing or the downloading of that extension. We've set up our little S2026 folder. We've plopped down a new folder in there and called it 216 sync. So all's well as there. The next steps are going to involve actually getting onto Zaratan. And then after we do that, we'll connect what we did on the local machine to what we're doing here. Just a second, I need to get rid of some stupid pop-up that happens. I expect that's going to happen a bunch of other times, but bear with me here. So to do this, you'll need to open up a command line terminal of some sort. And on Windows, that can be accomplished by punching the little Windows key, and that'll get you the little context menu, and then typing CMD, which is the cmd.exe, good old-fashioned one. If you have used command lines on Windows before, then you might try as well the Windows PowerShell, but I'm not acquainted with that, and I cannot guarantee that anything that we do here will work in that case. Mac OS users should do something like command space to open up their sort of launcher, and then punch in terminal, and that should give you the native Mac OS Unix terminal that's there. All users then can punch in the command SSH, and then the directory ID login.zaratan.umd.edu. The directory ID here is what you use to log into all of the UMD systems. If you're going on to Canvas and you're prompted for the central authentication, like what's your username, if you're sending email to yourself, this is the first part of your @turpmail.umd.edu business. So in my case, I'll punch in SSH. My directory ID is profk, and then the machine that we're going to log into has an internet address. It's login.zaratan.umd.edu. This looks sort of like an email address because those two things are somewhat related there. In fact, you might be able to send email to someone at a machine that looks like this. But in this case, it's really a user identity at then a specific server of some sort that we're going to log into. Now, in my case, I need to pause for a second to reset a couple things so that this works out the way that it will for all of you. Bear with me for just a second here. All right, everything looked fine there, and it's got to eliminate a couple things there. Okay, so this SSH command then is going to attempt to contact that server and then log me in on it. Let me see here. So I'll punch enter. And since this is my first time logging in, I will see a message to say, are you sure you want to connect to Zaratan? You can punch yes for this. That will be a one-off. And then you're prompted for a password. This is the same password that you'll use to log into all other university systems. Zaratan uses the central authentication system that the rest of the U does. So I will punch in carefully my password. You'll note that for security reasons, the characters of the password aren't actually displayed. This is an old Unix convention, but rest assured that they're registering there. If you screw up your password, know you did, then just punch backspace a bunch of times. And if you do screw it up and punch enter, that's all right. It'll just pre-prompt again because it wasn't good. Looks like I got mine right, so I'm going to pick 1 to dual authenticate. This will send out a push notification to my phone. I'll pull that out and say, yes, it is indeed me logging in here. Now, this process of logging in here is just a little bit wonky. And to that end, I'm just realizing that the prompt here looks a little bit wrong. I've sort of fast forwarded a couple steps on this thing. So give me 1 second here and I'm going to sort of reset a couple things to make sure this looks right for the remainder of the presentation. All right, that's a little bit better. I had needed to reset an environment for this laptop and the environment on Zaratan because I went through this in a dry run before recording this video. At any rate, this process of logging into those remote machines is a little bit tedious. And one of our goals is by the end of this setup video to have gone through some additional steps that will greatly ease the burden of doing so that you have to type your password somewhat less as you log in there. For now, though, all we really need to do is some minor setup here. This is a Unix terminal, and it will honor various command-line commands. These are different than what are present on Windows systems, if you've ever done any command-line stuff there with this like command.exe, but they are akin to what Mac OS uses because it's a Unix system, a Linux system here, and Mac OS has similar roots being a BSD derivative, so a Unix system there. So for instance, you can type ls to list what's in this directory. And you notice here that I've already got a 216 sync directory on here. It's colored blue, along with a whole bunch of other files that you need not worry about too much. I'm going to get rid of that right now because, again, forgot to reset the environment on that. So don't bother typing this command. Instead, you probably won't see 216 sync directory there at all. So on listing again there, you'll see that rm command, it removed it, but we'll want to recreate it. And so this is one that you will want to type. We'll want to create a 216 sync directory. That's going to be one then that is used to synchronize stuff that's on your laptop to what's up on Zaratan, the remote machine. So this is the command mkdir, M-K-D-I-R, and then the name of the directory. In this case, it'll be 216 sync. That's the same name that you put on your own machine. Doing another ls here should show that 216 sync is present. Your colors may vary a little bit here, so don't worry overly about that part. We can also then change into that directory using the cd command. This changes the working directory of the shell. And so I'll punch that in. I'm going to just put 216 and then dash, and then I'm going to press the tab key because there's quite a bit of tab completion that's available on Unix command lines like this. And the less typing I do, the better. Pushing enter now, you'll see something in my prompt changed just a little bit. Now instead of having a tilde, which is a shorthand on Unix systems for your home directory, it reads 216 because the shell is now in this directory. If I do a directory listing, you'll see nothing in here because it's an empty folder. And that is just fine because we don't really need anything in this folder yet. The whole point is going to be to connect the local machine to this remote machine so that things that I make on the laptop can be easily transferred up to that remote machine there. Okay, I think that's just about all the steps we need, except one last thing. We're going to display the directory that this is, its full path there, by doing a pwd. And this will print out that the directory that the shell is currently in is under / the root of the Unix file system, folder home, and then there's my home directory prof_k, and then this 216 sync folder. And that path to this folder is what we'll need just a little bit later, so I'll just leave it up here and we'll display. Okay, now we're going to come back over to VSCodium and start to connect this folder that's on my machine to the one that's up there on the remote machine. I'm going to come back over to the setup guide here to walk you through. We've gotten on there and all's well, and sort of a couple things here that sort of show about what to do there. Oh, I suppose while we're on here, we may as well do this sort of one-time setup that's required here. There's a command to copy here, and you can copy this one very directly, the source prof_k business. This is going to read a certain file that's in my home directory and should allow then all students to get a configuration set up that is appropriate for the class. So I copied that here. And then depending on your platform, there might be sort of a Command V or an Alt V. I'm going to try Control Shift V because sometimes that, it works on this Windows machine instead. But your mileage way there, if in doubt, just type the whole thing in as you read it off. So punching that and then punching enter should get just a little bit of sort of jargon here as a couple things need to get set up installed. But if it was successful, then you'll see the prompt down here has changed color. It's now sort of a light blue. And as well, then the name of the user, me in this case, Prof K, is displayed along with the directory and this little square braces instead. And partly that prompt then makes things just slightly more apparent, like where is the prompt compared to other things. And then as you might submit sessions for help to TAs, they'll have an easier time saying, oh, who are you? Like, what's your login and that kind of thing. All right, so we're back in the home directory. I want to get back into the 216 sync directory here and do a PWD because we'll need that a little bit later. But I think that advances us to the steps that we need here, which is you'll have something here that's a path that we'll need in just a second to configure the SFTP thing. All right, now we'll go back to VSCodium. And over here in VSCodium, we're going to fire up the command palette. If I remember right, this is like, what is it? There's some shortcut for it, but I always forget what it is. So let's see, the command palette is Control-Shift-P, which really irritates me because I use that key binding for other things. But man, I'm slumming it on Windows, so why not? Control-Shift-P, it might be Command-Shift-P on Mac, so be careful. Punch in SFTP, and the only option that'll probably come up is SFTP config. All this is really going to do is to create a little configuration directory here under the project directory, S2026 here, called VSCode, and then in here we'll create a default version of the sftp.json file. This is the file that configures the extension to work in this directory and how it should behave. You can see it's populated with a few sort of default options over here, which are going to summarily just Control-A to select everything and then delete because we've got our own version of that stuff as a template. So over here, scroll down a little ways and find then this bit of business that unfortunately is spread across a couple pages. So I think here I'm going to extend that down a page so that you can see the whole thing. So this is the configuration that we'll want to copy in and then make a few tweaks to it, both now and one later. So I'm going to come back over here after copying and pasting that thing in. There's one option here that I'm going to delete for now, as we'll want to add that back in later. Likely the version that you'll get, in fact, I'll do it now, is not supposed to have this private key thing yet because we can't leave it blank. SFTP is just not that smart. But here, then this is sort of the default version that's shown over here. It has the host that we'll typically want to synchronize with, that login.zaratan.emdu.edu. You'll need to alter this part right here, your directory ID. That part is Prof K, because that's me. And then this is the path that we got from that PWD business over there that ends with 216 sync. So I'm going to take this entire thing and delete it here. And over here on the session that was on Zaratan, I'll copy this entire path that's here. Now, real important, make sure this ends with 216 sync. A number of students have encountered problems when they've neglected to do that because you'll attempt to synchronize your whole home directory, and that's a recipe for disaster. On this system, I think Control-Shift-C works to copy this, but probably on Macs, you could just do Command-C or something like that. And then in here, I'll paste that in. So this will be the remote directory to synchronize against, and then the context, that's the local directory to copy things to and from there. The remaining options there are ones that you can explore if you want to read the docs, but otherwise they should be fine as defaults. Finally, the little dot up here that is next to the file name indicates this is an unsaved file. I'm going to press Control-S, or if you really want to slum it, you can go up into the menu and find the save there, but Control-S is definitely your friend on that. And this will then eliminate that dot, indicating that it's a saved file. It's about on disk there. We'll talk about that process actually later in class, like how it looks over there. All right, so this configuration file then is set in order to allow transfer of information to and from the Zaratan server for it. Now we can test this just a little bit by doing it here. This 216 sync directory is empty right now. I'm going to punch this little button to add a file in here and call it maybe hello.txt. and then put in here, hello, Zaratan, something like that. You can see again, this is unsaved. And so I'm going to press Control S here. And you'll see I'm immediately confronted with a prompt because the SFTP extension wants to be able to synchronize this thing. Oh, you saved it on your local machine. I should really transfer it up to Zaratan there. And so let's go ahead and do so by punching in username and password here, or rather, this is just password because I already configured the username. So here you'll actually see some of the characters going by. And on successfully punching that in, you should get a second prompt, and this is actually for the duo factor thing. So I'll punch 1 here to send, again, a signal to my phone to duo authenticate that part. And I pressed OK on that. Now you might have seen a little thing flash by over here, and then just a moment ago there was a done hello there. And that is an indication that things have happened. SFTP has done some things. One way to potentially view that is over here. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember where this is over here. Like there's supposed to be some... never mind. Doesn't matter right now. We might pull up the debug console at some point, but it's not that important right now. What we can actually do is come over to Zaratan. A moment ago, this was an empty directory, this 216 sync, but if I ls in here, there should be this hello.txt file that's in there. A common Unix command to show the contents of files by spitting it out into the terminal is the cat command, short for concatenate, and just plopping that down, you'll see the hello Zaratan there. Didn't terminate it with a new line, so it's a little bit gross, and so my prompt is a bit obscure there, so that's not great. Let's just try one quick modification of that. So there's no new line at the end here. I'll punch enter, maybe add something else. Let's see, successful sync, and then punch enter again. I'm going to save this once more because it's unsaved. You'll note here that by default, the SFTP client, the extension, it caches passwords. So it has an open connection right now. So it didn't prompt me this time, but should have transferred this over, which makes things slightly more ergonomic. If I cat hello.txt again, you'll see, aha, okay, cool, successful. That's there. Now, later on, we're going to try to set up, do some initial setup so that you never have to punch passwords in over here. But if you don't get that far, then at least like the caching behavior will sort of help you a little bit on that. Now, we're going to delay further creation of files and moving things back and forth right now until perhaps we work on Lab 1 or have some other things to just synchronize there. But basically, this is the bare minimum setup at this point that's required, and you should be good to go. A few tricks to know about. If you right-click or otherwise get a context menu for this 216 directory, you should see some options to do local to remote and remote to local synchronization. That happens automatically when you save single files, but occasionally you may wish to trigger it automatic or sort of manually in this way. The local to remote will copy files that exist on your laptop here up to the Grace server. And its counterpart, the remote to local, will copy files from Grace down to your local computer. Be a little bit cautious because this is a synchronization process. And so if there are things on Grace that are not on your computer, when you synchronize local or remote, those things on Grace will get deleted. And likewise, if you inadvertently cleared out the directory on Grace but still have your files here, don't do a remote to local sync because the empty directories on Grace will get transferred down to your local machine, and that's just no good. You'll lose all the stuff there and be sort of stuck on both accounts. And now you can emulate that a little bit. If, for instance, I created a file here by saying echo hello, and then plopping that down into a message.txt. You can cat that out, the message.txt, and it has the word hello in it. Do a listing, and now there are two files. Here there's the hello.txt that we created and synchronized, and then the message.txt. But on my local machine, I've only got one of those files. So if I wanted both, and this will commonly happen as you maybe compile programs or complete a project and want to get a copy of the zip on your own machine, you'll need to do a remote to local sync. So I'm going to punch that option down here, right click on that, and then remote to local. And you'll see a little bit of business here, and very in short order, that message.txt will pop up, and you can see, here it is. It's got the hello in it. This is the basic workflow then of making changes here, and then potentially running code up here where you'll have the C compiler and the testing framework and other software installed. Now, it's possible for you to install that locally and potentially work, particularly if you're on Windows. You might try the WSL Windows subsystem for Linux, but it's not guaranteed to work, and staff are going to have a limited amount of support that they can render for that kind of stuff. All students are encouraged to make use of Grace, as there actually will be a few exam questions about how do you remotely connect and get work done there. But I think that brings us to the end of this set of sections. We've gone through all this stuff here. And then, I think we're on to the next thing here. Now, the next section is to some extent optional because it involves several additional setup steps, but every student is encouraged to do it because it's going to make your life so much easier and save you a great amount of time, because it will set up something that is, Zaratan has an exception for this, basically password-free login out there. Now, there's some caveats to that, but no matter. This involves 3 additional setup steps, and so if you want to pause to go to the bathroom or get a snack or something like that, now's a great time. But if you're on a roll, then just stay with me here. The 3 setup steps will be to install the VPN client that UMD favors called Global Connect VPN client. Virtual private networks are this technology that allows your computer, even if it's in a distant location, to look like it's on the local network for things like UMD's network there. The second step will be to create an encryption key pair that will allow then verification on Zaratan that you are who you say you are, because you have sort of a secret encryption key behind this. And then the final step is just to add another line in that SFTP configuration, so it's there. Now, I won't go through the installation of Global Connect, the first part of this. Suffice to say, punch the little link over here and go to UMD's software library, and you'll find here that there are versions for PCs, that's Windows, Macs, and Linux. In this case, I'm on a PC, so I punch this thing and look around. Most Windows systems are going to be x86-64 based, so select that. If you really think you're on an ARM system, a different processor architecture, something we'll talk about later in the class actually, you can punch that. But explore a little bit and look at your system settings there. Mac users probably will have to sort of suss things out. I guess you've got to sign in for access on this one, but there's some other setup there. But take a moment and go through the steps to actually install and set that up. Once it's there, then you should be able to punch in whatever context menu, Windows key, or command space on Windows and see this Global Protect business that's on there. Right, so I'm going to jump back over then to the setup guide for this part and talk through, there are actually detailed setup instructions based on your platform according to this link. So if you need some time, that's fine. One really vexing part about Global Connect is that once you or Global Protect, once you start it, it'll appear oftentimes as a little icon in some system tray, so it's not super obvious that it's there. I find this sort of vexing, especially because it hides those things. But if you've started it and it doesn't seem to appear, look for that in a sort of tray icon here. And in my case, it's this little grayed out thing that if I hover over it, it'll say it's Global Protect. Punching that will pull up a kind of fuzzy looking window, because I'm pretty sure this is like built for old Windows systems, but now they're sort of running on new Windows systems, so the font rendering isn't great. The version that UMD distributes is already going to be pre-configured to use the access link that UMD has for its virtual private networks, this access.umd.edu. If it happens to be something different than that, then just punch that in. You should be able to just press connect here. Now, interestingly, this should open up a web browser over here that will prompt you for your login information. And it's sort of like, well, the point of this is to remove password logins. Once we set this thing up right, then this will be the only time that you have to log in and then to enter a password and do authenticate. And then after that, you'll be able to SSH in and SFTP things without ever having to punch your password in. So I'll punch mine in here. And then press enter. And this should then do a little talking back and forth. To this thing, you might have to say, is it okay for this website to do this thing? Mac users, I'm told, will probably have some additional steps where they may have to allow, I don't know, some security authorization for that part there. The instructions for that are on the detailed link over here, the detailed instructions and setup there. So sort of walk through that part, and then if you've run into problems at that stage, it's fine. But there are a few pictures here to sort of tag along. Now I lost my little sort of icon thing here, so I'm going to pull it back up because there's one other minor irritating feature here that this version of the software doesn't allow you to select a gateway. And I'm not actually sure exactly what a gateway is here in this case, but I do know that you have the best results in most cases when connecting to Zaratan if you select the tunnel all gateway. And this is just pick the option, it'll sort of disconnect and reconnect. It might prompt for another password or something like that, but in all likelihood, not so much. Okay, so that's step one. And the installation of Global Protect, Global Connect, I get them confused over there. I guess it's Global Protect. The installation of that is, maybe it takes a few steps, but then when you start your computer, consider like starting this thing up and connecting there, as it will make things over there. And the nice part is that this thing's fairly stable, that if you go into suspend, like close your laptop and change locations from a classroom to a study space, you go home, then in a lot of cases that Global Protect connection is persistent. It'll not require another login for a while. And that's the part that we'll leverage, and that it's continually then authenticating you to say you are who you say you are. And so certain systems like Zaratan will honor that with a little bit of additional setup. Let's get to that additional setup. We're ready for the second step, which is the classic SSH key generation here. Encryption keys are this really useful tool that, I forget, was it the 70s or 80s or so? The RSA folks figured out, oh, you can do this public-private key business. Super interesting computer history that we'll leverage now to, with SSH, create a key pair that will allow you to then authenticate using that, and in combination with the VPN, that leads to the password-free part of this. So open up a terminal again. This one will have to be not on Zaratan. So if you're looking at this existing terminal here that's on Zaratan right now, that won't do because we need to do some things locally first. Instead, I'm just going to punch up command.exe once more, and this will open up a terminal that's in good old C: here. That's the home machine here. The command that we'll want to grab is listed here. It's ssh-keygen, all sort of one word, no spaces. And this one has a variety of options, but the default behavior is really all we need. On pressing enter, it's going to start generating a private and public key pair. The public one is one that you can share, for instance, put it up on Zaratan. The private one is that you'll keep on this machine and not share with anyone. The default options here, this particular ED25519 encryption algorithm, that's I think a public-private algorithm. This one is just good enough. And so over here, enter the file, the default one here, which I'll want to make a minor note of, that is totally fine to use. So I'm just going to press enter. And I don't need a passphrase for this, so I'll press enter again. And then I'll press enter one more time to match the empty passphrase that I had before. This little crap art here doesn't really matter at all. It's not of any concern, but it will have created two files now in the .ssh directory of your home directory. The ID _ ED25519, that's the private key, and its counterpart, that ends in .pub, is the public key. Now, hopefully you'll get a chance to take an encryption class at some point, a cryptography class, and study these things. But for right now, all we need to do then is twofold: to get this public key up onto Zaratan, and then to point the SFTP extension in its configuration file at this file, which is the private key to use to log in. So advancing over here, you can see in the setup guide, we got this part done, and now we'll need to make use of this SCP command, a secure copy, counterpart to SSH. We don't want to log in, we just want to transfer a file, and then make use of this command. I'm going to copy it and then make a few modifications to it if I can. So copy there, and then paste here. Now, one of the things I need to change is I am not your ID. My actual directory ID is prof k. The rest of this stuff I think should be okay, because in most cases, the shell will start in your home directory. That's true on both Mac and Windows. And I should say these commands were the same on both Mac and Windows because they both have the SSH tools installed. This will be the default name. So all you really need to change here is the username that's over there. And the copy, what this command is going to use to take this local file, which is, oh shoot, I have this wrong actually. I should probably change this, the pub part here. And I want to change this in the setup guide so I don't forget. I want, stupid page up. Let's see here, .pub, okay. Crap, okay, and then there's line breaks here. Maybe I'll try and pull, crap, okay. Well, I'll fix the formatting for that later, but you catch the drift. We want to copy the public part of this over there. And I think this all looks okay. So it'll copy that local file to this remote location that's me on Zaratan in my home directory in the .ssh directory and name the file authorized keys in that case. If you're already hip and using Zaratan and stuff, then that file might already exist, so be a little bit cautious, but most of you probably this is your first time doing any SSHing, so don't worry about it. Punch enter. We'll have to, oh, you're killing me, Smalls, you're killing me. Oh, shoot, okay, I have the wrong file name now. It's like, what is it, 25519, okay, so minor gaffe there. Punch enter. Couldn't find that file. Can you find this file? Yes, you can. Okay. Now this, once it's successful, should be the last time that I need to punch a password in. Let's see. And then this will show a little progress, and it copied things up there just fine. Sort of copy that thing to the location that we're looking for here. And now the big test is if I SSH to Zaratan now. Let's see, login.zaratan.umd.edu. I have my VPN enabled. It's got the little green thing here, and if I punch it, it's on the tunnel all part of that thing. I've just copied my key over, and so punching enter here, voila, no password, and I'm in. So that's a super great convenience because you log into the VPN once at the beginning of the day, you move around and stuff, but you can go onto and off of Zaratan all day long without needing to bother with the password stuff there. Okay, one final thing then is that by default, the SFTP client that we had, it doesn't honor that. So we'll need to copy one more thing over here into that. And so I'm going to copy this bolded line that looks like this thing. And then zip over to VSCodium, open up this sftp.json part. Just to get the syntax right, I'm going to put this below the context part and paste that in. Now the path to part here is something that we'll have to modify a little bit. Just a short time ago, let's see, we were over here. This is where I was generating those keys. So I'm going to come back up, and you can see this was C:users Kaufmannen. Someone spelled my name wrong when they set this machine up. How dare they? And the sort of only caveat to this is that VSCodium does not like backslashes in paths. So I'm going to copy this thing, which is the path to the private key. I'm going to paste it in here. But then you can see VSCodium is like, ooh, backslashes, no good. And there's this history on Windows of using backslashes to separate the path names, the folder names and things. I'm just going to change those backslashes to forward slashes. If you're on Mac OS, then likely those are forward slashes and there's no C: involved because that's a more traditional Unix system. I'm going to save this thing. And because I just want to test this sort of on a clean run, and there might be some cache passwords in here, I'm going to quit VSCodium and then fire it back up again. VSCodium is there. And this should come back in over here. And then the sort of test here is going to be, let's see, password free jazz. Now, again, this is an unsaved file. If I save it now and I've done everything right, VS Code is configured right with to use the private key, and I've logged into the VPN, then this save should happen. It shouldn't even bother with a sort of a password prompt. I can myself a new line there. Now watch this little SFTP thing on here. That's should change for a moment as it connects and uploads, and no password needed. Super convenient. We can check that over here as we go into 216 sync. And if I cat out the, was it the hello.txt, then we see the password-free jazz. Cool. Okay, so that should complete the additional steps of setup. When you would want to start working again during the day, it would be a matter of open up your laptop, check to see is the VPN connected or not. If it is, then have at it. If it's not, then connect and make sure again to change the gateway to that tunnel all. And then with a single login, you should be able then to SSH to and from Zaratan as you work here. Now, there are a couple of things that I think are worth mentioning in terms of config here. So this is a terminal that's external to VSCodium, but it also has an internal terminal as well. Depending on how wide your screen is, you might have to punch this little context menu. There's a keyboard shortcut to start it, but you can start a little internal terminal down here as well. This will start in sort of the Windows setup there, over there, but you can do the same sort of SSH business over here, login.zaratan.umd.edu. And since it's leveraging the same SSH stuff and the keys and virtual private network and stuff, then you're in over there. So typical workflow is going to be to have some code up here, and this is your terminal that's on Zaratan that's going to allow you to compile and run things. All right, I think the only remaining things that are in the setup guide are some additional information on potential errors, so read those if you haven't, and then a brief crash course on some Unix commands, some of which we touched on a little bit briefly, but we'll touch on those more as we move ahead there. And this one-time environment setup is something we already did, so yeah, I think we're good to go. All right, look for, towards the end of the first week of the course, a video from me that will describe how to solve the first lab to help those who are struggling a little bit to get started and get their coding environment configured, set up there. And that will presume that you'll have finished most of this stuff and are able to log on to Zaratan and sort of make do with a few things. Well, I should say in the last bit, when you want to exit these things, you can type the command exit and that'll get you off of this part. You can also just, if you've got an open terminal, close this terminal and it'll go away, and that'll close the connection to Zaratan. Great. Well, I look forward to seeing all of you in lecture. If you have trouble with these things, ask during discussion sections, come to TA office hours, come to my office hours. Everybody's very willing to help you to get this set up. And like I said before, I'm very pleased that we'll be able to use Zaratan because it was not possible to do this password-free business login on the previous servers that we were using. And so this should make things a much better experience for those of you who are with me this semester. I look forward to seeing you soon. Happy hacking until then.